Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Hey there, out there in internet land. This is your friend Charlie Hutter, and it's time for the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. Oh, it's been a little bit of a crazy day. It's been a crazy day. You know why? Because I've got a Honda Element that I love very much, but it has decided it does not like going up hills, and it wants to go as it goes up hills. And today I had to go to Northampton, Mass, to from Bellows Falls, Vermont, to get my teeth cleaned, to drop off paintings at a gallery, and then to swing by Royal Talons North America and pick up some gesso. And it just took a little bit longer because I had to baby the car up and down the hills, but we made it. My teeth are in great shape. The gallery looks great. And my friends at Royal Talons North America had a wonderful announcement, which is that in 22 Cobra water mixable oils, we'll start having a medium. They'll start having a thinner. They'll start having a safflower oil, just pure safflower oil, like I currently use the Winsor Newton. So we're going to have either Kyle or Jeff back on, and we're going to discuss those new improved Cobra paints. Anyway, so I'm here, and I'm glad that you're here, and we're going to talk about Cuba. Why not? I had the great fortune to be part of Eric Rhoads in 2016, did one of his painting trips to Cuba, and it was 100 people. We now know that 100 people is kind of more than the Cuban tourist infrastructure is really prepared to deal with at any given time. Their little tour buses hold about 35 people. So it ended up being 3 buses. And we spent all our time, we were supposed to go to Cuba and paint, but our hotel, to have a hotel that was large enough to hold all these painters, we were out near the embassy area, which is a good 40 minutes outside of downtown Havana. And all the restaurants that we were going to were in downtown Havana. So most of what we did was ride the buses from the hotel to the restaurants, back to the hotel, to wherever we were painting, back to the hotel, to the restaurants, back to the hotel. So the second time Eric Rhoads did the trip, he did it with only 50 people, and we stayed right downtown. And let me tell you, going to Cuba is terrific. I'm sure most of us have seen the pictures of the 1950s automobiles and the amazing architecture and the incredible patina that everything has. And I am here to tell you, it is ever so much more so in real life. It was one of the most amazing trips that I had ever been on, even though all we did was ride the bus back and forth. It's not all we did. We also did do some paintings, and we'll be looking at those paintings. But the second trip with only 50 people was even better. And it led to the fact that I have now gone back to Cuba two additional times. I think it's 2, and am planning to go back again. So Betty Sue, the awesome Betty Sue, is here in Vermont with me, up on the 3rd floor in her little studio, and she has the slideshow ready to go. So let's just jump right into the slideshow. So what I now do when I go to Cuba is I don't do painting in Cuba. I take a zillion pictures, and then I do studio paintings from those photographs. So saying, this image is a studio painting of a privately owned automobile, a 1951 Chevrolet, that one day on the 2016 trip, Eric Rhoads and I went off to paint together. And I said with great confidence to Eric, well, there's a car that clearly is broken down and isn't going anyplace, because it just looked like it had been sitting there a long time. And as we were painting away, the owner came by to go off and run some errands. And he was kind enough to, once he realized we were painting his car, he was kind enough to go chat with his friends for an hour and a half while I finished the painting. This, as I say, though, is a 30 by 30 studio painting that I did of the car once I got back to the US. So I was able to take a lot more time to make sure I got the dimensions exactly correct. But Betty Sue, could we have the next slide, please? Because the next slide is the painting that I did on site. These paintings were all 8 by 10. When I go travel somewhere to paint, I take a little box that can hold about a dozen of these panels, can hold a dozen wet panels. Just an 8 by 10 is an easily portable size. I also, when I'm in the States and have more kind of luggage, I will have 11 by 14s or 10 by 12s. But out here in Cuba, I just did the 8 by 10s. And this is my usual gator board with muslin on top of it. So this was about a 2-hour painting. And the feller whose car it was just transfixed by watching the painting process at work. Can you go back to the studio slide, Betty Sue? This one, you can see the proportions are a little bit better. The grill work is more detailed, but I still wanted it to have that kind of the patina and the rust, the feeling of age that suffuses everything in Havana. So that's why I kind of allowed all those drips in the background to really read through strongly. I like this painting a lot. It was shown briefly at a gallery and then snapped up by one of my avid automotive collectors. Back to the next slide, Betty Sue. So you can see this one is much cruder in comparison, but it has a certain vitality. But I kept some of those ideas when I did the studio work, and those drips on the upper right, et cetera, and the basic layout of the painting. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. This was what I now do much more when I'm traveling somewhere, is I just take my sketchbook. This is in a little town called Cojimar, which was a little fishing town where Ernest Hemingway would go there to drink, but I think he went everywhere to drink. So I'm not sure exactly how much of a distinction that is. But in Cojimar, there was this 1958 Chevy parked on the sidewalk, and I just sat down and sketched it. And one of the things that is wonderful about Cuba is people just come up and start talking with you, and it really, it would be nice if one knew Spanish, but if you don't know Spanish, you can still somehow not communicate really well. But a lot of the Cubans have family in America, and you can usually figure out what each other is trying to say. What was conveyed to me is that this Chevrolet was owned by an Italian fella who did speak English, but no one could find him. But they all said, "Oh, it's the Italian Chevy." So I did this little sketch, probably about a 45-minute sketch. It says 2:30 to 3:30. Okay, an hour-long sketch. And I was pretty happy with it at the time. I don't like it so much anymore, but I liked it a lot then. And then when I got back to the States, next slide, Betty Sue, I did a studio painting with the Putney painters, just working from that sketch. There was no projection or anything available. So between study and studio, do I take color notes or photos? I do take photos, because now what I do when I go to Cuba is I just take photos. I take hundreds and hundreds of photos, and I don't worry about trying to do the art. As I said, with the first Eric trip, we were mostly on the bus. On the second Eric trip, we did a lot of painting just in walking distance from the hotel, the Park Central Hotel downtown. And then a couple of years later, I've started doing small trips. And the first one I'll talk about in a minute. But the first one we said was going to be a painting trip, but there really was never enough time to paint. So that's pretty much why I now just, I take photos and then I paint from the photos or from drawings in the studio. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. My feeling about going to a location to paint is, the older I get, the more I feel like you can paint, that anything can be a painting. Doug Fryer, the wonderful Utah painter whose work I hope you all know, and I'm sure you know how much I admire him. Doug Fryer just posted a painting of an apple. I eat apples all the time. It doesn't occur to me to paint apples. I mean, they're beautiful, but his painting of an apple is heartbreaking. It doesn't matter that it's an apple. It is the act of someone seeing something profoundly. And to me, I want to experience a place while I'm there. When I climb into doing a painting from life, I climb into thinking about the interplay of lights and darks and shadows and edges and composition. I really am not thinking about the place itself anymore. So, although I enjoy painting at a location, I feel like I actually get more from the experience by trying to immerse myself in the experience, recording it with photos, and then working from those photos at home if I feel so moved. But all that said, we are going to look at a bunch of my field paintings from when I was in Havana. This one is from 2018, just a street scene. And what I want to point out compositionally on this is that the light there is so intense and so strong against those buildings. That's what I'm really playing with by having those sharp geometric shapes. I kind of render carefully the curve of the pillar on the extreme right. But then it is, circle that again, Betty Sue, with the pointer. Exactly. But then the rest of it is really just a few big shapes and then some vertical strokes down in the street to indicate all the pedestrians. And there are always a lot of pedestrians in downtown Havana. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. This is the Bacardi building. This is another teeming street corner. And one of the wonderful things about going to Cuba is that the people are so darn friendly and helpful. I was being kind of typical paranoid American when I was working on this painting, and the light changed, and all of a sudden where I was painting got flooded with light, and I needed to move to the shade. And it took me a little while to move my painting rig into a shaded area. And about 5 people, came over and helped me move my rig. They didn't know me. They just were passing by and saw that this feller who's a little bit gimpy was trying to move his painting setup. And then I reached in my pocket to tip them all, and they were all like, "No." It was almost, they were almost offended. They weren't actually offended, but they were almost offended. Now, on the other hand, there are lots and lots of people in Cuba who will be happy to be tipped, especially people in the big tourist areas dressed in traditional garb. They do expect to get 1 kook, which is basically $1, every time their photo is taken. But The Bacardi building there on the right is an icon in downtown Havana, and it still has the Bacardi logo, that the bat is kind of pressed into all the concrete filigree there. The part of this painting I really like is on the left-hand side, the shadows and light of that great arch, and then the fire escape to its right, and the street pole, the street lights. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. This is called Looking Toward Grandma. And one of the things that one learns when one travels to Cuba is you learn who the national hero is. You land at the Jose Marti Airport, and Jose Marti is the national hero of Cuba. And he was a sensitive, poetic sort who wrote revolutionary poetry and lived in Chicago, came to Cuba for its War of Independence around the turn of the century, and died in the very first battle that he fought in. But he stirs the soul of the revolutionary fervor of Cuba, and is still outside of every school is a bust of Jose Marti. And so every time we pass a school, we always give our respects to Jose. But the grandma was the boat that Che Guevara and Fidel and everybody came over from Mexico in 1959 to start the revolution. And the grandma is ensconced in a park about a half mile up this boulevard. And it's called the grandma because it was somebody's private boat, and they named it after their grandmother. I had always thought that the grandma was some Spanish word that I didn't know what it meant, but not true. Anyway, immediately to the left of where this painting is, where I'm looking, is the Park Central Hotel. And the Park Central Hotel is it's one of these hotels that it's a partnership between the Cuban government and a hotel chain. And up through the Obama administration, loosened the restrictions on United States travel to Cuba. And what was all of a sudden allowed was larger tour groups of Americans. For years, Canadians, Europeans, they can come to Cuba, no problem, but the US had limited tourism to Cuba. Eric saw that opportunity, organized the trip, and as I said, we had the 100 painters. 100 Americans descended upon Havana looking to paint things. The second time, we stayed out at a hotel called the Hotel Palco. That was the one that was out by the embassy. The second trip was 50 painters, so we were down to 2 buses. And we were able to stay at the Park Central Hotel. The other thing about the Park Central Hotel is it has good internet. And so it is it's one of those places that people staying in Havana will go to and get a cup of coffee and pay for the internet there and get caught up on their email and stuff. And one day, one of our painting group had been hanging out at the bar at the Park Central, and said to me, "Oh, Charlie, you run trips, right?" Because in my other life, ladies and gentlemen, you may or may not know this, but I have a company called Roots on the Rails that does it for years. Since 2003, we have done trips that they used to be trips on trains, but nowadays it's very hard to charter the railroad cars that we love. So now we tend to do events. We do trips to places, and Actually, that's where I met Betty Sue, was at an event we did at the La Posada in Winslow, Arizona in 2014. She was one of the musicians who played. But I digress. Here we are in Havana, and this one of our group of painters says, Charlie, I met this very interesting woman at the bar. She runs small group trips to Havana. And I thought maybe that would be good for your company. So I got her card, and she handed me this woman's business card, and it said Carol Steele, Steelina@gmail.com. And I was like, I know Carol Steele, because 25 years ago, when I was a music manager, our artist Star Williams toured extensively with Joan Baez. And Joan Baez's percussion player was Carol Steele. And I just remembered that her email address back then was stelina@aol.com. So I said, it's got to be the same person. And percussion, you know. So when I got back from that trip, I contacted Carol Steele. Let's have the next slide too, Betty Sue, as I just pontificate away. I got in touch with Carol Steele, and Carol Steele said, "Yes, indeed, that's me. Would love to work with you." And so we did a small trip that was supposed to be a painting trip. But, ladies and gentlemen, Carol Steele is a character and a half. She lives at least half the year in Cuba. She is fully inducted into the Afro-Cuban religion, which is, you know, the drum is really central to it. And she is a world-class percussionist. If you know the Steve Winwood song, Higher Love, that is very, very prominent tabla part, that is Carol playing the tablas on Higher Love. Tears for Fears, she toured extensively with Tears for Fears, Peter Gabriel, Diana Ross, Parliament Funkadelic. The list is as long as your arm, and she's got a million stories. And we did that trip, the ostensible painting trip, where instead we were always on the go, because Carol is always taking you someplace, because she knows a guy. She gets you into just world-class dance rehearsals, choral group rehearsals, amazing stuff. Her religious family are some of the most prominent percussionists in all of Cuba. They live in a small town called Matanzas, about an hour and a half from Havana. And we go to their house and have a meal and a private percussion show that is just unbelievable. So there really wasn't a lot of time to paint. We did go out once or twice to do it, but then we said, let's just do regular Roots on the Rails trips, groups of 10 people just going and having the Carol experience in Havana. She also takes us through these wonderful restaurants. And I will explain I have to explain, this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but the tourism that is still allowed, that large expansion of tourism that happened under the Obama administration, was curtailed in the Trump administration. Large tour groups are no longer allowed to go to Cuba. You probably remember reading that travel to Cuba was going to be restricted again. What is still allowed is small groups going, quote unquote, in support of the Cuban people. Before I started doing these trips to Cuba, I didn't understand what that meant. What that means is there's a whole sub-tier of essentially like Airbnbs or B&Bs or private homes that have a number of guest rooms that are not controlled by the government. Similarly, there are government-run restaurants And then there are also privately run restaurants. And what is meant by travel in support of the Cuban people is you stay at one of these B&Bs, you eat at the privately run restaurants. That is still allowed. And that is the auspices under which we do our trips. If you do trips of more than 10 people, you need to involve the official Cuban tourism department. And that you are no longer doing a trip, quote unquote, in support of the Cuban people. So we have this wonderful ability to do these really small trips with a woman who really knows Cuba. And she takes us to these amazing privately run restaurants that are just, the food is extraordinary. Interestingly, Cuban cuisine is not spicy. It's not particularly spicy. We have to bring our own Tabasco sauce because Betty Sue and I very much like Tabasco sauce. But it is, it tends to be, there's always a fish, there's pork, and there's chicken. Occasionally there's beef. Sometimes there's lobster. The tourists get the best of everything, which is it's fascinating. The even in an ostensibly communist society, you've got such inequality. With the money talks no matter where you are. One of the things that Carol does that I think is extraordinary is she takes us to a market where Havana residents buy their groceries, and you get a sense of what the reality is for the folks who live there. You know, that 1 week there will not be any chicken, and the next week there's no laundry detergent, and we're always given a list of what is needed in Cuba at the time that our trip is about to go. And I'll tell you, you cannot go wrong with bringing laundry detergent. Bring Cubans laundry detergent and you will have a friend for life. Oh yeah, Cuban food is astonishing. So good. Betty Sue can attest to that. Nod in the background, Betty Sue. I can see you, Betty Sue, even though others can't. Yes, she's smiling and nodding. So yeah, we do have another trip scheduled, and I'll get to that in a second. Just wanted, this was one day, this painting was one day, we went out, this is with one of the Eric Rhoads trips. We went out on the buses and came to this, just we're driving out in the countryside, and Eric was like, this is a neat place, let's pull over and paint. So he painted, and you're out here in the countryside, you're in a modern Chinese tour bus. Going past you are people in horse and wagon and bicycle, and then a 1938 Ford, and then a 1982 Russian vehicle of some sort. It's a constant world like you've never seen it. But anyway, I was painting here, and the area to the left was this kind of overgrown field. And there was something kind of disquieting about the place. And as it turned out, that field was it was an old sugar plantation, and this field was the graveyard of the slaves who had worked on the sugar plantation. And I called this little painting the dark place, because once I learned that, it felt very dark indeed. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. So this is the final slide in my little slideshow. This is a 1957 Dodge that serves as a taxi cab in Havana. And in Havana, there's 3 types of taxi cabs. There are the modern Chinese vehicles that are the taxis that the people who work in the government, the public-private partnership executives, the current day professional people use the modern Chinese taxis. Then there are the Yank tanks, which are the 1950s American cars that are what the tourists like to ride in. And I absolutely am one of those tourists, ladies and gentlemen. I love riding in those 1950s cars. Proudly, I'm proud to say it. And then the third kind of taxi are the taxis that the workaday habaneros ride in. This taxi is one of the third kind. They basically, I think in many poorer countries, what taxis basically do is they'll announce where they're going. People going that direction will pile in. They'll get 8 or 9 people into one taxi and then head off and letting people off as the taxi proceeds to its destination. So this is a 1957 Dodge that, as you can see, has been rode hard and put away wet. It is not a Yank tank in the tourist taxis. What Carol Steele says is that the tourist taxis look exactly like the Havana prostitutes. They look really great from 30 feet away. The Yank tanks are beautifully gussied up 1950s cars. Many of them are now painted pink and sparkly maroon and stuff. The workaday taxis are just house paint. It was just green house paint on this one. But I hired these guys for the guys who run this taxi. I hired them to just park it there for 3 hours. This is a studio piece done. I did a small painting as well. I don't think I have a photograph of that one. But oh yeah, it totally matches my aesthetic. But I hired these guys to just park the taxi. And they went off and got coffee and came back and watched me paint. And then they went off again and they came back and brought me coffee. And then I ran out of time and they said, no, keep painting, it's really good. And then I finished the painting and they asked if they could take photographs of the painting. And I said, absolutely. And then I went my merry way. I kept running into these guys for the next 3 days that I was in Havana. And the final day, I was dragging my art stuff back toward the tour bus, and they pull up and they say, we give you a ride. I said, I don't have any money. They said, no, we give you a ride. So they gave me a ride back to the bus. And then as I got out of the taxi, they both got out. There were 2 guys. One was the driver. The other was the fellow who knew how to speak English, who sat with the driver in the front seat and was talking with me and translating for the driver. And I got out, they got out, and the translator said, you need to know, Cuba, America, we are like brothers. We are like family. Family goes boom, 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 fight all the time. Does not matter. We love each other. You are like my brother. Hugs me. His buddy hugs me. It was the most wonderful moment. It has stayed with me, and I've hoped to see that taxi again in subsequent years when I've gone back to Havana. I have not been lucky enough to see it yet. But I have a print of this painting to give to those guys if I do see them again. So someone asked if we're going to be doing another trip to Havana. Betty Sue, can you make me large? Can you make me large? Yeah. So someone asked if we're going to be doing a trip to Havana. Indeed, we are. Betty Sue and I will be going March 1st through 8th. And if you're interested in joining us, It'll be, again, with Carol Steele. All our trips to Havana are Carol Steele. Carol is our guide. And basically it'll cover all your hotels, almost all your meals when there, and all the activities. You'll still need money for some meals and tips and stuff like that. But I think it's $3,800 is what we're now having to charge. Post-pandemic, it's gotten a little more expensive. So I think there's 6 places left on that trip. Do you have a crawl, Betty Sue, that has the Roots on the Rails website? If just go to rootsontherails.com for information about the trip. And then there are 2 more trips scheduled that my partner in Roots on the Rails, Sarah Ovenden, will be running. There is April 1st through 8th, that has 9 places available. And April 18th through 24th has 3 spots available. Yeah, so if you want to join us, if you would like to join Betty Sue and me, I promise you it is a wonderful, wonderful experience. Unforgettable. This will be my 5th. It'll be Betty Sue's 4th. Yeah, I cannot wait to get back there. Carol's right-hand man is named Baz, except she calls him Bazito, which means little Baz. And we all call him Bazito too, which I think he would rather be called Baz. So if you join us, let's pledge not to call Bazito Bazito. We'll call him Baz. So yeah, come. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go today is that the holidays are fast approaching. And because Betty Sue and I, though we love the Cuban people, we are capitalists. So we have a special offer right now. If you visit bit.ly WP-artbook bundle, you can get my three books of paintings, 2013 paintings, 2015 paintings, 2018 paintings, and Betty Sue's Work, Play, Everyday planner. You can get that whole bundle for like $85. Normally, my 3 books individually would be $20 each, so $60. And Betty Sue's planner is $47. So that's a big savings. And they all make wonderful Christmas presents. So check out bit.ly/WP-artbook bundle, and I would appreciate it if you'd pick up a few of those. I think that does it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, don't know what the topic will be, but we'll be back here next week, and we hope to see you then. You take good care, and hasta la vista. Bye-bye.